Well, good afternoon and greetings from the graduate school, and welcome to the WKU 3-minute thesis information session. We have with us Professor Lauren Bland and Professor Gary Hughes, and the graduate school is deeply grateful in advance for their time and effort. Both Professor Hughes and Professor Bland have been helping with the information session for the past 2 years, and again, we are thankful for their knowledge and expertise. We have about 25 slides in this presentation or workshop will help graduate students provide information about the 3-minute thesis and also help in their participation in the 2023 WKU 3-minute thesis competition. So the first question obviously comes to mind is, what is the 3-minute thesis competition or the 3MT competition? Well, here is a slide, one PowerPoint slide that depicts the 3-minute competition history in a nutshell. So if I were to present a 3-minute presentation about the 3-minute competition, it would be as follows. What do a map of Australia depicting lack of rainfall for 2006, a picture of the University of Queensland, and a timer have to do with the 3MT competition? In the mid-2000s, Australia suffered from a severe drought and shortage of rain. This was called the Millennium Drought. The drought affected the southern and eastern parts, including the Queensland state and the city of Brisbane, where the University of Queensland is located. Residents of Brisbane conserved water through creative ways, and to preserve water, individuals such as the then Dean of the Graduate School, Dr. Alan Lawson at University of Queensland, affixed a 3-minute yak timer as the one shown on the right in the slide. In brainstorming ideas as to what else could be done in 3 minutes or less, Dr. Lawson conceptualized the idea of the 3MT competition. The first 3MT competition, needless to state, was organized by the University of Queensland in 2008. Since then, the competition has spread far and wide, with over 900 universities located in over 85 countries organizing this competition. The graduate school at WKU will be organizing its third 3MT competition in 2023. Graduate students have up to 3 minutes to integrate and synthesize their key findings from their research projects and present their project in such a way that a lay audience can understand. Hence, the 3MT competition provides an excellent opportunity for graduate students to hone their oral communication skills. In addition, the competition provides an excellent opportunity for graduate programs to showcase the rich diversity and the incredible talent of research and creative scholarship activities pursued by graduate students at their institutions. And lastly, the 3MT competition helps legislators and the public better appreciate and understand the importance and potential societal impact of research and creative scholarship activities being carried out at WKU. So this was a 3-minute style presentation delivered in 3 minutes or less. So just some very basic information. The competition is originally was meant for celebrating the research by PhD, but has expanded to master's students. And in fact, master's students who are not in a thesis may also participate because they are doing some projects, research, and creative scholarship activities. So this competition allows an individual, a graduate student, to explain their research such that a non-specialist audience can understand. And we have all this information in the website, so I'll skip these slides fairly quickly and focus on how to make a compelling presentation. So any student in good academic standing who are in a degree program may participate in this competition. And we encourage students who are not in a thesis option to also present their work. And in fact, new graduate students who have started their research are strongly encouraged to contribute to the 3MT competition. A project need not have completed because you may have preliminary research or findings as well. And we have kept it simple. There is a template that is there in the link from our 3MT main homepage. And we ask students to make a recording and submit a YouTube video presentation, and more details will be coming in the future slides. The competition is an in-person competition on Thursday, February the 23rd. And there is a submission window that will open after the break when classes resume for the spring 2023. And like I said, there's a template where the students will post their information and slides. That's their slide, and create a YouTube video link and send the video link. We have 3 judges who are non-faculty, and so the finalists will be noted by February 16th. And again, the competition will be on the 23rd. There are rules that are drawn from the 3MT organization, and presentations are limited to 3 minutes. And when a presenter starts their presentation through speech, that's when the timing will start. And video submissions, we also have some criteria here that we ask you to look for in details. Again, the competition rules are set by the 3MT University of Queensland. For the YouTube link, we need a continuous 3-minute audio video without any sound edits, no props. Presentation should be spoken, not a poem, rap, or a song, etc. And the decision of the panelists will be final. So please go through this competition rules in the future. And here is where I defer to Professors Bland and Professor Hughes. We like you to have some information in text and also images in your slides. And Dr. Hughes, do you want to elaborate on this slide?
I believe on this slide that Dr. Bland is the one who's going to talk about this in the next 2, and then I'll pick up on the slide after those.
Thank you. Dr. Bland, please.
So this is talking about your audience. If we're going to be talking to you as potential participants or as students in graduate school, we're not going to talk to you about something you would do in kindergarten, nor will we talk to you about taking your accountancy exam. We wouldn't talk to you about anything except something relative to the 3-minute thesis. Similarly, that's what you're going to do in this case. So you're going to make sure, remember, you have to know your audience. Who's your audience? No faculty members. So faculty love jargon. So you're not going to use academic language, all the stuff that you've been learning these years in graduate school. You're not going to use that long. You're going to write, you're going to write for and talk for people who don't know. That's going to force you to make sure that you understand well enough to help someone else understand. In my profession, we have to explain things to families or to patients who may have undergone some kind of a medical procedure. Well, we can't use big medical terms, especially if somebody's in a crisis of some sort. So you want to think, how can I explain this to someone in a way that's not condescending, but that's very clear? You want to make sure that everybody understands what are the important concepts, what are the important things that have to be done absent the academic type of language. What is the point? When Dr. Kadali was starting, he was talking about how this program got started. In 3 minutes, we understood certain points relative to that. So you just want to look at the outcomes. What is it that you were trying to do? What did you do? There's a student in our program who's going to be, who was hoping to come today. She's going to be looking at, she's surveying first responders to see how they deal with people with severe handicapping communication and have to actually use a device to communicate. Well, she's got a very specific question, so she'll be able to talk to them about that kind of thing. And what you may want to think about is, how would it be if you were explaining this to your cousin or to your friend or somebody who loves you and wants you to do well, but hasn't spent 2 years in school? You want to make sure that they're as excited about it. So please convey your excitement and your enthusiasm without a bunch of wordiness. So you can go to the next slide.
Thank you.
The next one is talking about telling a story. It's so you've done that. So you have spent the time. The student from our program who was hoping to come here today, she's starting out with how she chose this. Her father is a firefighter. She's heard some of his challenges. So she wanted to say, well, gosh, with some of the things that he's gone through, how would it be if he ran into somebody who was deaf, or if he was trying to help someone who was relying on an electrical device in order to communicate? How would they manage? So that's how she got to her story. So if she were to participate, I would hope that would be a big part, similar to what Dr. Kadali started talking about, how that particular program in Australia, in Queensland, was started. So you may want to think about a narrative, think about the concept that a narrative has, that it's got a beginning, a middle, and an end, right? Every story we learned in what, third or fourth grade, that there's a story, there's an end, there's a climax. You're going to have that part in there. You may think, oh, 3 minutes, I can't get that done. I assure you, you can. We've had people be successful from here. This program's been around a while. You want to think again about that opener, about that. How did you start with this? When has someone, what has worked? Why did you come up with this? What is it that somebody else might be able to relate to? Might you be able to relate to something that a first responder does? Remember, the audience is not going to be a bunch of faculty members. Maybe maybe somebody in the audience's dad is also a police officer. So I think it's important to have that. And of course, this concludes by reminding you that you want to have a summary, a couple of sentences that are going to restate the importance of what you did and why. So
thank you so very much, Dr. Bland.
The next one, the last one might have a clear outcome, I think is next.
Yes.
Okay. So you want to make sure you know what you want the end to be. You know, when you're developing a thesis, right, you've got a hypothesis, you've got your intro paragraph, and you've got the purpose of your study. Well, you also have a purpose in your presentation. What do you want your audience to take away from it? What do you want them to have learned? What do you want them to be able to talk about secondary to what you're discussing? You want them to leave that event thinking, there were 10 presentations, but there was this one. So you want to be that one that makes them be able to leave and take something away. You want to do what you can to proof it. And one way that's suggested is by reading it aloud, but also as it was on the previous slide, to your friends, to your family, and make sure you're doing it for people who are going to give you feedback. You want to make sure there's folks who are going to say, oh, no, girlfriend, I didn't understand any of that. Or to say, yes, okay, I got it. I understand what you were doing. You really, at that time, this would be the time to ask the audience, what did you know? Give them, not just ask for feedback, but for critiques, right? Ask them, did it do what I told you it was going to do? Do you think that it was important? Do you think that it was valuable? So.
Wonderful. So one challenges, Dr. Bland, is I get from PhD students is they work for 5 years, or even master's students. They do multiple projects. So in 3 minutes to distill all those work is a challenge, right?
Yeah.
So what would you suggest to a student who has done multiple projects? Do they choose one or both, or just stick to just one and highlight the main the reasons behind doing that project and the outcomes and the results?
That's the route I would go, is with the one, because 3 minutes is hard for one topic. I think it would be really hard for two. And if you choose one, you're probably going to choose the one, and Dr. Hughes may have a different thought, but I think you're going to choose that one. If it's important to you, then it's because it probably speaks to a larger audience. So that's the route I would go.
Wonderful. Thank you. All right.
Well, so following along with what Dr. Bland has just talked about, and as Dr. Kudali has asked the question regarding how many ideas to stick with, one. And I'm a strong believer in one. And these suggestions that we're looking at here is directly related to the slide that one is able to have. So when it says less is more, it's really talking about that principle that a lot of us have heard, to keep it short and simple. You've got 3 minutes within which you're going to be presenting. You've got to keep it simple. You've got to keep your slides simple. It needs to be something that's not going to be distracting from what you say, but instead is going to support what you say and help someone who might not understand clearly what you're saying without it to then more clearly understand it. That's the reason why text and complicated graphics need to not be a part of your slides or major portions. If you're using any text at all, they need to just be labels. They need to be very short, very terse, so that your audience, if they're looking at something and you refer to it, they can pick it up very quickly and then continue to listen to what you have to say. And then whenever it says you do not want them to be reading your slide instead of listening to your 3-minute thesis, that's for sure, because if they're reading something, it takes them more than 1 second to look up and understand what it is there to be read, then they're missing what you're saying. They're focused on those words and not focused on you and what you are trying to convey. Next slide.
Thank you.
So here we have a slide that's a perfect illustration of how we need to simplify it instead of getting it more complicated. We have so much material here on this slide that each of these visual aids could be a slide in and of themselves that are used in a presentation that goes on for 15 to 30 minutes. You only need one idea on a slide that you're trying to get across. And of course, that's going to be the idea of your entire 3-minute thesis. So stay away from trying to load up a lot of things on a slide. Keep it simple. The next slide is actually going to show something that's a little bit better. Here we have where it's illustrating to us what's going on with a leukemia cell and cells then that allow its transmission. Now, this, as far as simplicity, this really does simplify things a lot more than our previous slide did. One thing that I would say about this slide, though, is some of the color combinations are hard to read because of lack of contrast between those things that the presenter is wanting the audience to see and pay attention to, and the background itself. So it's very important to make sure that you have sufficient contrast between your text, between your graphic, and the background itself. Next slide. So now some of the personal touches that we can make. What's so important here between this and the second bullet point is to break out of the Microsoft or Google Slides and whatever they present as possible designs. You can use your own creativity while keeping it simple as well. Part of this would also be making sure that you use some symmetry so that you don't have a whole lot of white space over on one side and everything going all the way over to the other margin. So using some symmetry will help your audience to find it to be more appealing and less distracting as well. So the personal touches allow your audience to understand the importance of your research as you use that creativity to focus on the message that you're trying to get across to your audience. So your slide should complement what you say. It should not take over your presentation. You're trying to get the message across. So think in terms of what this slide can do to assist you in getting that message across to the audience that you have tried to analyze, thinking in terms of how that audience is going to perceive what you present, not only orally, but what you present visually as well. And an engaging visual presentation then can make or break your oration. It can make or break your presentation as to how effective it is in communicating clearly, succinctly, and compellingly to the audience that you have before you. Next slide.
I just want to talk about one thing, Professor Hughes, if you don't mind. So I
Sure.
had the opportunity to attend a 3-minute thesis competition for a regional meeting. And coming back to the bullet point 1, the graduate student talked about his research related to colon cancer and was able to personalize it by talking about an individual he knew who had cancer.
Mhm.
So you could really see the raw emotions in the student, and it made it, from my perspective, quite compelling. Just a little touch to say that his drive for working hard and to find a potential cure had a compelling reason.
Mm-hmm. Most definitely. Okay, now, first bullet point says so much. Practice, practice, practice. Practice does so many things for us. First off, it helps us to get our timing down. And it helps us to make sure that we've got our message down so that our message is coming through clearly, and it builds our confidence. The more that we practice, the more we are assured that we have it in the right time range, the better we know what we want to say, the more confidence that we're going to have. Now, you're going to be submitting the video to YouTube for the preliminary aspects, but then in terms of the actual competition, you're going to be speaking personally. So the more you can let your practice be similar to the situation in which you are going to be speaking, the more confidence you're going to be able to build as well. So speaking to those who are not in your area, speaking to those who have little, if any, prior knowledge about your particular topic, and asking them after you have spoken to them, what are the things they understood? What is it they didn't understand? Will help you to also know how you can go back and you can edit and you can reshape things so that it's going to be much more understandable to those who are not knowledgeable in your particular area, while at the same time helping to provide that additional confidence. You also want to make sure that your voice does not become monotone. People will always listen whenever something sounds more conversational and whenever it sounds like it has a little bit of an emotion. And this goes back to what Dr. Kuldali was mentioning with regard to what one might include on their slide, something that's personal, that personal touch. If you've got that personal touch that's involved with it, then you're going to have some more vocal variety almost automatically, because you're wanting people to hear what you have to say, to pay attention, and for it to have some impact. So make sure that you vary your rate. There are times where you will want to slow down and other times where you might need to speed up a little bit, but be careful that you don't speak so quickly that people cannot understand you, which means that you will need to work on articulating your words if you have a tendency to slur your words whenever you speak a little faster. It's also helpful to vary the volume and the of what you have to say. Now, sometimes you can vary the volume while maintaining projection, so that even when people whisper, sometimes they can project their voice. And it's important for people to continue to hear what you have to say, even as you try to give some type of emphasis to what you are saying. Don't rush, pace yourself. Timing yourself is going to help you to learn where that right pace is. And then be sure and use some strategic pauses. Sometimes a pause and just a little bit of silence will help a point that you're trying to make sink in, and people really stand up and pay attention to what it is that you have to say. And in terms of the link that Dr. Kuldali has provided here, that's at the TED Talks website, I strongly encourage you to take advantage of this particular video that Julian Treasure has provided. Julian Treasure has spoken many times in TED Talks. I utilize some of his work even in some of my teaching, trying to get my students who are in communication and public speaking to pay attention to the importance of these various aspects of communication that he winds up covering. So just simply search for Dr. Treasure or Julian Treasure on the TED Talk site and use this title, and you should find that video very quickly. Finally, whenever it comes to body language, what we do with our body, and this is especially important whenever you're doing the in-person presentation. Not to say that it's unimportant in the video presentation, but it's especially important in your in-person presentation. You want to make sure you are looking up and you are making eye contact. Now, let me correct some things that sometimes have been put out there for people who might be a little bit nervous about speaking in public. Some people will tell you to pick out 3 people in the audience and look at only those 3 people. Just vary how you look at those 3 people. The problem is everybody else knows you're not making eye contact with them. And it also tends to become a pattern whenever someone picks out 3 people, so that it's not random. It's just where one goes around from one to the other, and then makes that same pattern, that same cycle again. So instead, pick out each individual one at a time and focus on them for about 3 to 4 seconds, because that will help them to become more engaged in what you say, even though you might be spending well over 95% of the time looking at others who are in the audience, or even more than that. The fact that you give them that 3 to 4 seconds will cause them to then take note of what it is that you have to say. And I would say this too, whenever you are doing your video, look at the camera. Make sure that you look at the camera as if it was somebody's eyes. And as you do so, you're going to have a more effective video. Now, second thing in person, and that is, don't look over people's heads. Some people have been given a suggestion that if they feel nervous, that instead of actually making eye contact, just look above people's heads toward the back wall. The problem is, again, just as it is if you pick out 3 people, people know you're not looking them in the eye. So take the time to make that eye contact, because it is something that can be quite crucial. And while you're making that eye contact, just speak to them in conversational tones. Second thing, don't turn your back to the audience. Just continue to face forward. If you have a slide behind you, you need to know what the content of that slide is. And the only thing that you would need to do is to just turn very quickly to make sure the slide is showing, if you are the one who is in charge or in control of its projection. Third thing, practice how you're going to gesture. A lot of times what we find is we wind up having repetitive gestures that we fall back to. If you plan out your gestures, it's going to help you then to have a greater variety of gestures. And it will also help you have gestures that are going to be more suitable to each of the points that you're making at a particular time. So remember to plan out your gestures. Plan out your movements. So if you feel the need to move around, although you don't have to for the 3-minute thesis, you can stay in one spot. But if you feel the need to move, make sure your movements come across as purposeful, especially at times where you might be transitioning from one subpoint to another subpoint. Very good times in which you might turn and look at somebody else in your audience that's over on the other side and begin to move over that way so that you are lessening the distance between you and the person that you are making the eye contact with, which then gives what we refer to as a sense of more immediacy, which shortens, it decreases the psychological distance between you, the speaker, and the audience member by utilizing that aspect of decreasing the physical distance between the two of you. Don't make the common mistake of shifting from one foot to the other foot, rocking back and forth. Don't make the common mistake that some make of just kind of pacing back and forth. Stop and stand in one spot for a little bit. Keep your weight on both feet, not back and forth on one or the other. As you may stand there on both feet with weight evenly distributed, you can do so in such a way that it actually helps you feel a greater sense of confidence because you're not putting any type of stress or strain on any particular part of your body. And then just simply make sure you are maintaining good posture so that that posture helps to also convey the confidence that you are trying to convey. And as you do so, you'll find that this too, along with the other things that I've just said earlier on this slide, will help your audience pay closer attention to what you have to share.
Professor Hughes, I have a question for you. Unlike a lecture where we can use laser, we have to use our hands or say, well, this image in the center or the right. So do you have any suggestion, because the 3MT rules are such that we can't use any props or any pointers. Mm-hmm. So how would one direct to some key information on the slide?
I would say that it's important for the person, if you're going to use your hand to draw attention to it, that you always make sure that you stand on the opposite side of the hand, the opposite side of the projection of where you would point. That way you're not tempted to cross over and as a result, turn your shoulder or turn your back to your audience. So if you're right-handed, then stand over on the other side of, on the left side, so that when you point with your right hand, then you're not going to be tempted to turn your back. Same thing for those who are left-handed, which, so you get over on the right side so that whenever you point with your left hand, then you're not crossing over and exposing your shoulder, the back shoulder, or your back to the audience.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
And actually, I would like to add a point for on this slide. The last point talks about dress, and it's talking about your dress code. You know, you're going to want to think about this as being an interview because it is something important. But what you don't want to do, and this was unintentional, but if you anticipate pointing to something, this bracelet that I'm wearing, wherever it is, this would not be one I would wear if that were going to be doing it. Maybe my watch, because it's not going to move, right? So you don't want you can't have any type of a costume because it could be looked at as a prop, but you don't want anything about your outfit being too casual or too dressy. You're not going to have on an evening gown, but you're also not going to have on things that are distracting in some way. And I think a bracelet, we have to talk to our students about that. Yes, it's a simple bracelet, but if you're constantly having to adjust it, that means you can't focus on the speech therapy stuff you're supposed to be doing, right? And if your bracelet is rattling, or if your chain, because someone said if you're playing, I think a couple slides ago, talked about playing with your hair. Well, if you're somebody who's doing that, well, then pin your hair back that day. If that's part of what you do, if I'm nervous, that's what's happening. So I do have to make sure that's a ponytail day, whether it's a cop out or not, but that's, I think, being prepared. But so the dress, I think, is absolutely critical. But to go back to the beginning of this slide, it says, make sure we've talked before that you're going to have your friends listen to you. You're going to try to get feedback. Well, also you provide that feedback. So maybe you record. there's, thank goodness for Zoom, right? So you can record not just audio, but then you can actually do a video recording yourself. And so you can analyze and say, did I do this? Think of it like a rubric that your faculty use when they're grading your presentations in class or they're grading your research papers. Did I do this? Did I do this? Did I do this? So certainly look toward that. But also think about people who are good speakers. So you see a link here that's going to give you information about successful finalists. That's really good. It would also be great, I would think, if you could see some who weren't so great. I mean, you don't want to embarrass people, but I think that's always a good contrast to see some that weren't so good. But I know you have to be treating that gingerly. But I would think that you want to really understand what kinds of things would work. I have a question for Dr. Kadali, though. I think a lot of what I'm hearing that we're discussing, I think totally applies whether you're going to do the you're going to do the 3MT. I think a lot of it is also applicable for your thesis or your dissertation defense.
Absolutely.
So when along the line would you suggest? So if somebody is going to defend would you suggest this happen before the defense or after the defense, or where would that fall?
Sure. So the way I look at it, Dr. Blaine, is a 3-minute thesis, maybe just part of your dissertation, right? A student may not necessarily be at the culmination phase of their thesis or dissertation. Okay. So it potentially could be a newly admitted graduate student who has some preliminary results supporting their hypothesis, and so their excitement and focus will be on the potential impact and talking about how their preliminary results provide a tentative suggestion that their hypothesis is about to be proven. But whereas when you have a student who is about to defend or is just defended, let's say in January, because the competition is February, they could rather focus much more on the results and the potential applied impact. So the way I look at it, neither of those should be at a disadvantage. Obviously, the judges may be more swayed if they have results to show that their hypothesis or their ideas have worked.
Okay, I was just curious because I think this would, so much of this, I know I'm hoping, as I said, our student does in fact participate, because I know she's going to need to defend in like March or February or March. Okay, thanks.
Wonderful.
And I'm done with that one.
Else, Dr. Bland or Dr. Hughes in this slide?
I would simply say
something.
Oh, sure. Please go ahead. Please.
So when I'm listening to someone and they are trying to convey their project, a big thing for me is filler words.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yep. Great point.
So I just wondered, I don't know, I guess, do you all think that that's a big thing for you all listening?
I would simply say that with regard to the filler words, since this is something that is being planned out, that anyone who's going to be involved in the 3-minute thesis competition, that one should have firmly fixed in one's mind exactly what you want to say, so that you're not tempted to use those filler words. Part of the reason why we have those filler words that are a part of our daily conversation is because we are attempting to maintain our turn in the turn-taking process of a conversation. And as a result, whenever we haven't finished a thought, but we're trying to think of how we want to say the next thing, we insert those uhs and ums and other types of filler words to give us extra time to think, and then proceed to say what we want to say. Mm-hmm. But whenever you're presenting, and this is what I always tell my students who are in my public speaking classes, you are the turn. There is nobody else who's going to be taking a turn. So filler words have no place because they have no function other than just filling up time. And so I hear you on that. Filler words should be something that are not there because we know what we want to say so well,
Mhm.
no need to even stop and think.
Okay, I was wondering.
Yeah, and so I hope that helps.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. It's very habitual language, and it is something that if you have a quote stutter, then that's different. But when you're talking about someone who's just every other word is, and the filler words are sometimes just sounds, and sometimes they're words, and sometimes they're phrases. And we technically call those anything that does not contribute to the linguistic function of your statement. Then it's just, I think it's holding up your time. It's bad enough, I think, in a day, like Dr. Hughes said, but in 3 minutes, boy, you don't have any syllables to spare. So.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Great question. So this is more about the judging criteria. And so I'll just quickly go through this. And so we have the preliminary competition, if you will, where students submit a YouTube video link and then an in-person competition. And so there is a rubric developed by the 3-minute thesis organization, and we are merely following the judging criteria provided by the 3MT. And so we're looking at the content, we are looking at the significance, the potential impact of the research or scholarly work. As Professor Hughes mentioned before, and Dr. Blind as well, you may use a jargon, but explain what it is, but do not, this is not a conference that you're presenting to your peers in your academic conference. So here, the audience and the judges certainly may not know a highly technical term that you and your peers use in the discipline. Logical sequence is also helpful for the judges to come to an informed decision regarding your presentation and what is the outcome of your work if you are towards the completing your thesis or dissertation may also be very helpful. And we'd like a good balance between the introduction, the results, and also the conclusion. So this way you're not focused too much on one aspect and the importance, the underlying hypothesis is not lost. There's also additional criteria regarding engagement and communication. And this is where all the advice given by Professor Bland and Professor Hughes are very important, making eye contact, those 3 to 4 seconds, but not too long that you're staring at them, but shifting your eye contact from one section of the audience to another, the vocal range, the body language, the stance, etc., are also very critical. So all these pointers that Professor Bland and Professor Hughes had mentioned before go into the scoring and the rubric from the judges. In terms of the YouTube recording, we understand that sometimes the bandwidth may not be very high, and so the quality of the audio and video recording will not be a factor when the judges review your YouTube link. But again, all these communication skills that you want to hone upon are exactly the rubric that the judges use in order to come to an informed decision. So we will have a judging panel of 3 judges. They will be WKU staff. And the rubric is the one prepared by the University of Queensland, used to rank the student. What we also do in the graduate school is the first place winner will have the opportunity to represent WKU in a regional association of the Council of Graduate Schools called the Midwestern Association of Graduate Schools. Their annual meeting is in the last week of March in Chicago. And the graduate school will pay for the flight, the accommodation, and per diem of the graduate school. We think it is important that we support a graduate student's need, and this way the research that is being conducted here is disseminated to a larger audience, and that in turn provides an opportunity for a graduate student to represent WKU, and also in that process the reputation visibility of WKU is enhanced to a larger audience outside of WKU. This is basically the template that we give you, a blank template, less is more. And you have, all we need is a full name and title, and you have the full opportunity to populate this with images and text. But again, we do not want your slide to be distracting such that we miss your oration. The submission window will be opened once we come back after the spring semester. And there are further details in the 3MT website. The link is here in the slide. A recording of this presentation will be shared with faculty, staff, and graduate students and posted in the graduate school homepage. And here are the 3MT WKU website and also the University of Queensland website. So Rena, Shahrir, and Laurie, any questions for Professors Bland and Hughes?
I do not, but I have a comment. This was very helpful. And even preparing to defend my project, it's good to review these points.
Well, we are grateful to Professors Bland and Professor Hughes. They bring in years of experiences in communication, and that's why we in the graduate school lean upon their knowledge and expertise. So thank you so much, Laurie. This actually begs the question, maybe we would want to have a workshop on how to give an effective thesis and dissertation, right? It has much of these elements, but also there are certain nuances that are different and distinct from talking to a lay audience. So
I really think so. I think that from what it has been interesting to me, a student will spend all this time and effort on a thesis and we'll say, oh, you're the expert, but then they're still petrified about how to share. Mm-hmm. And I'm thinking, you know this better than anybody. You know this stuff. We don't. I mean, we know a little bit, but you know this particular topic. So helping someone along that way, they may find that to be very beneficial.
I would certainly find that very beneficial because I'm already starting to lose sleep knowing that this is coming in February, March.
Wonderful. Thank you, Laurie.
I'm not quite there yet, but it is good information for the future.
Which program are you in, Rena?
Right now, I am a non-degree seeking student, but I want to get into the counseling program.
Okay, wonderful.
Mm-hmm. I've worked pretty closely with Dr. Sauerheber.
Okay.
I spoke to her first, and Dr. Sales.
Okay, wonderful.
And you're an employee, correct, Rena?
I am. Yeah.
Okay, right. So.
Wonderful. Shahrir, do you have any questions for us? Thank you for joining us in the workshop today. Professor Bland, any final thoughts?
No, just wish everyone the best, whether you're defending or actually doing the 3MT. I think WKU's been successful with 3MT. So I certainly hope that that some folks consider it. If you have friends who were not able to attend, certainly let them know that it will be recorded and available. I'm going to certainly be reaching out to our student who has shown an interest, but I wish everyone the best with whatever you decide.
Oh, thank you so much, Dr. Bland. Dr. Hughes, any final thoughts?
Yes, one thing that I thought of, and that is in terms of something like this, having exemplars that we do go back to and we make reference for our benefit. I really do believe it would be helpful for anyone who's going to be participating to go to that link that has previous contestants that were winners, and that will help you greatly understand what is most effective. Because I think that some of those are from our video only, from whenever it was a video only competition, and then there are some that are also from live competition. And thinking along those lines, those exemplars will be something that can be quite helpful.
Thank you so very much, Professor Hughes. Again, Professor Bland and Professor Hughes, thank you for taking your time in the midst of your busy schedule to share your insights for an effective presentation. And thank you to the graduate students for joining with us. We will share this recording with our faculty, staff, and graduate students very soon and post this in the graduate school YouTube link. Thank you so very much again, all of you.
Thank you. Will your slides be up as well?
Yes, we'll share the slides as well.
Okay. Thank you all for letting me
Thank you.
join.